Hello everyone, welcome to the CADthinkers YouTube channel. I'm Neil, and in this video we're going to be talking about how to make moving parts in TinkerCAD, a software that allows you to print cool things in 3D. Here are the two types of hinges that we're going to be covering. First is the articulated hinge, and second is the hinge joint. So first, the articulated hinge.
Hi everyone, I'm Tanvi and I'll be helping instruct today. Alright, so the first hinge we'll be making is the articulated hinge. This hinge basically allows you to create numerous different projects that move at a bunch of different points, or so-called joints. This means that you could make projects like an articulated butterfly, lizard, slug, or shark with just this hinge. For this part of the tutorial, I'll be helping you make any project articulated. So let's get started. Alright, so the three parts you need to make any project of yours articulated are right here, and an example project I've made for a bat is right here. Now, if you want the specific parts, the STL files will be linked down below, but I'll be showing you how to make each one of these articulated parts by yourself, just in case you need to change a few dimensions here and there for your own projects. The first thing you'll need to do is drag and drop a box to your work plane. Then change the dimensions of that box to be 100 millimeters by 1 millimeter. Now this might change for your particular project depending on how wide and where you want your joints to be, but for us, this will do. The next thing you need to do is change this box to be a hole when you click on it, so this will allow us to carve out areas for our joints to be later on in the project. Alright, so making this next part is a little bit more tricky. When making the hinge, there's an inner casing and an outer casing we need to worry about. And the outer casing provides this cylindrical axis that the inner casing moves around and actually makes the hinge move and provide that articulated feature that we want. So first things first, the three different shapes you're going to need for this part of the project are a cube, a cylinder, and this semicircular shape here. Now the first thing we're going to worry about is the outer casing. So I'm just going to duplicate this cube and I'm going to make it the dimensions that our specific project needs, which is 6 millimeters by 5.5 millimeters by 8.01 millimeters for the height. Now these dimensions can totally change based off of the project that you're specifically making, so just make your own creative adjustments right there. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this cube, and we're going to make it a little bit smaller than the outer cube we had just made, just so that we can provide that carving that the outer casing has. So after positioning your inner rectangle, make the inner rectangle a hole and then group these two together to make your outer casing almost done. The next thing you'll need to do is add that central axis within your outer casing, and the way you'll do that is just repositioning a cylinder and trying to put it towards the middle of this outer casing part. Alright, so after you position the cylinder, you're done with the outer casing of the hinge. Just group these objects together. Now, to make the inner casing of the hinge, you'll need to duplicate a box once more and make it the same dimensions that we made for the outer casing earlier. Now, line it up exactly with your outer casing box. After lining your two parts up, make the inner casing's base, which is this rectangle right here, make it a little bit less wide. I would say go for 2.25 millimeters. The next thing you're going to do is duplicate this box and then change the orientation of this duplicated box to be 90 degrees compared to the base. Now just move it to match up with the edge of the base you just made. The next thing you're going to need to do is group these two boxes together and then grab a semicircle object. Now make the length of the semicircle the same thing we made the width of this inner rectangle piece. So that was 2.25 millimeters. Then make the diameter of the semicircle the height of this piece, so 8.01 millimeters. And just adjust this curve to look a little bit more natural. Now you can change the orientation of the semicircle by just using these arced arrows right next to the selected object. Just hold down on this arrow and turn it 90 degrees. To move this object up, just click on the floating arrow and move it all the way up until it shows that there's 0 distance between your object and the floor of the workspace. Now just move it over to the edge of the inner casing you just made. After lining those two objects up, group them all together and you're almost done with your hinge. The last thing you'll need to do is grab your cylinder from this outer casing. You might need to ungroup it and just click on the cylinder and copy and paste it. Then move the cylinder over to your inner casing and adjust it to be a hole. After doing that, you need to make your cylinder a little bit bigger in the inner casing, like the hole, so that it'll easily move around the axis that the outer casing of the hinge provides. So I made the diameter of my cylinder 2.3 millimeters, and now I'm just going to move it down a bit and group it with the rest of my inner casing. Now the next thing I'm going to do is move my inner casing into the outer casing I just made. Now something you want to be sure of is that the central axis of your outer casing actually matches up with the hole you just made in the inner casing. So what I would do is click on your outer casing and make it into a hole so that you can see right through it. Next, just adjust the cylinder the way you need it to be adjusted so that the inner casing will actually move around it and make the hinge move. Now you can change the outer casing to be a solid again and your hinge should be finished. Now to make this final part, you'll need to grab a box and change the dimensions of it to be the same dimensions as the outer casing of your hinge. To do this, ungroup your hinge and hover over these white squares right next to your outer casing's box. These should allow you to see the dimensions, so we're still at 6 millimeters by 5.5 millimeters. So all I'm going to do is change the width and length of this box to be the same, but keep the height as its original height of 20 millimeters. Alright, after doing this, you can click on this box, make it a hole, and you should be done with all of the parts you need to make your first articulated project. The next thing you want to check is that your horizontal box matches up with the gap between the inner casing and the outer casing of the hinge. So change the width of your horizontal rectangular box to match the width of the gap between the hinge. Once you've done that, you're ready to start articulating your project. I'll be articulating with a simple box, but this can be replaced with any project that you're trying to add a bunch of joints to. One thing to be careful of is that the height of your project matches the height of your hinge. So my hinge is 8.01 millimeters, so I'm just going to make the height of this box 8.01 millimeters to make sure that the project works. Now the first thing you'll want to do to articulate your project is duplicate this long rectangular box we were working with. Then change its orientation to match your project, so I just moved mine 90 degrees, and I'm just going to duplicate this box to every location where I want a joint to be. Now, if you want your joints to be equally spaced out, you can also use the ruler tool in TinkerCAD, but I'll just be doing it by eye today. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to group all of these objects together. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take this vertical box that we made and we're going to just line it up with the outer casing of the hinge. After lining it up with the outer casing of that hinge, you need to click Shift and click on your hinge and the vertical box. This will allow you to move these objects together at the same time. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to change the orientation of it to match up with the joints I've made on my project. I'm going to move my hinge so that the gap between the inner casing and the outer. After doing that, I'm just simply going to duplicate these two objects and move them over so that each joint has a hinge within it. Now after lining up all of your hinges, click your base project and all of the vertical boxes you just placed. Then click Group Objects. The final thing you should do is hover over your entire project and group it all together. Once you do this, you've completely articulated your project. This means that at each one of these gaps, your project is going to move just like one of those caterpillars or snake articulated projects I showed you earlier. Congratulations, you've made your first articulated project.
And now for the hinge joint. This right here is a sample hinge joint. As you can see, it can rotate along this angle axis here, and the bottom part is going to stay fixed. So let's see how we can build this on our own. First, I'm going to add a ruler down here, and this is going to kind of function as my origin. So I'm going to take a cylinder here with dimensions 12 by 12, and the height will keep at 20. And then I'm going to get another cylinder here, raise it up by 16, turn it over, and notice I did keep these dimensions as 20 by 20. and then I'm going to bring it around the general area of this one. Now we need to align them together. So I'm going to select this and select this and use the align feature here and align them along this axis and this axis. And now it's nice and aligned. Next, I'm going to get another cylinder, and this time I'm going to make the dimensions 16 by 16. Raise it up, turn it over 90 degrees, make it a hole this time, and I'm going to bring it right alongside there. Again, I'm going to try to align this. I'm going to select the top cylinder, the hole, and then use the align feature. So I'm going to align them along here. They're already aligned there and there. Finally, I'm going to merge them together. So now as you can see, the hole went all the way through this cylinder, and to finish rounding off the bottom piece, I'm going to increase its height so that that part's not sticking through. And we can merge these two together. And now our final piece is to make sure that there's a hole in this area before we make the blue piece. Great, so now we have a hole in that piece. Then it's time to make the blue piece. So we're going to get a cylinder, and the dimensions of this hole here were 16 by 16. So this also has to be 16 by 16 if you want to make it fit. And I'm also going to make this blue as well. Pull it up, rotate it 90 degrees. And then I'm going to need a second piece there. This one I'm going to make it 12 by 12. And in fact, some people might make it even smaller, like 8 by 8, so that it can really move around nicely. And again, make it blue, pull it up, grab this piece, and then use the align feature. Again, align here and here, and then I'm going to grab this one, pull it down, and then merge the two pieces together. So now that piece is made, and we just have to put it in the hole. Pull it down. Keep pulling. Make the 0. That's going to be it for the basic design. However, one thing you might notice is that if you're making this in TinkerCAD, it's not going to rotate the way that I did at the beginning of the video. And the reason for that is that it's not rotating along the center of this blue cylinder that's inside the hinge. Here's what you can do to counter that. Let's get a cube here, color it blue, and we'll make the dimensions 1 by 1 by 1. Now, if we want to make this the center of this cylinder, the center of rotation, then the overall figure that's blue has to have a center at that point. Well, this cylinder has a diameter of 16, so that means that the center is 8 above the bottom and 8 above the top of this cylinder. The overall blue figure has a height of 33, meaning this center is 25 below the top. So it also should be 25 above the bottom if we want to make it truly the center. So we need to move this blue cube to a place 25 below the center. Well, where is the center? It's 8 above the bottom of this figure. The bottom of this figure is 21 above the ground. That means that the center is 29 above the ground. So I'm going to get this blue cube and move it 4 above the ground, because remember, we want to move 25 below the center. 29 minus 25 is 4. So let's raise it up and make it 4. And now let's just center it. So we're going to make it 10 here, and it's already 10 there. Finally, merge it here. And boom. Now, if I rotate it, it'll rotate exactly as we want it to rotate. And again, you only need to do this if you're planning to keep this model just for your 3D modeling only. If you plan to print this out, then you won't need to be doing that. Great job! You just learned how to create a hinge joint in TinkerCAD.
From creating dynamic animal skeletons to making useful gripper arms, the skills we learned today in making these simple joints are applicable in many contexts. You could even go as far as to create beautiful articulated projects such as dragons and sharks for bedroom decor, or if you're a robotics fan, you could use these techniques to create a jointed hexapod robot or an automated prosthetic limb that actually interacts with the environment. With these new skills, the world of creativity is truly yours. Thank you so much for watching. If you're interested in any more step-by-step tutorials or workshops in 3D printing and robotics, stay tuned. If you're interested in helping out with CAD Thinkers and volunteering, head to www.cadthinkers.com and apply for a leadership role. See you guys soon.